Today, more than 8 billion people walk the earth. From the bustling streets of vast cities to the remote villages of mountain valleys, humanity seems unshakable, almost eternal. Our voices travel across oceans in an instant, our machines touch the edges of the solar system, and our presence has reshaped every corner of the planet. But our story was not always one of abundance. There was a time, not in the distant world of dinosaurs, nor in the primeval swamps of the first mammals, but in the recent past of our own species, when humanity teetered on the edge of extinction, when the entire future of humankind rested not in billions, not in millions, not even in tens of thousands, but in the fragile lives of perhaps just over 1,000 people. Imagine it, a single small community, no larger than a village, carrying the weight of all who would come after. A population so small that the fate of the species could have been undone by a single disaster, a drought, a plague, a volcanic eruption. And yet, against impossible odds, they survived. From their persistence, every one of us alive today is descended. The billions of faces that fill our cities, the multitude of cultures, languages, and stories that shape our world, all trace back to those few who endured when the odds demanded they should not. This is the story of how ancient humans almost disappeared, and how the fragile line of their survival gave rise to everything we know today. To understand the scale of this near loss, we must first understand what scientists call a genetic bottleneck. A bottleneck occurs when a species' population is suddenly reduced to very low numbers. With so few survivors, the genetic diversity of that species collapses. The variety of traits, of defenses against disease, of adaptations for survival, narrows drastically. The future of the species is funneled through a narrow opening, like sand poured through the neck of an hourglass. On the other side, all that remains are the descendants of those who survived. This is what happened to us. Today, when geneticists study the DNA of modern humans, they are struck by something extraordinary. Despite our vast numbers, humans are unusually alike. In fact, two chimpanzees from different parts of Africa can be more genetically different from each other than any two humans, even if those humans live on opposite sides of the world. For a species as widespread and numerous as ours, this lack of diversity is astonishing. It means that somewhere in our past, almost all other lines of humanity were lost. Only a small, fragile population carried forward the genes that now make up every person alive. It is almost impossible to imagine. At the time of the bottleneck, perhaps only 1,000 breeding individuals remained. That is fewer people than fit into a single sports stadium, fewer than live in a small town. Every living human, from the mountains of Tibet to the rainforests of the Amazon, from Arctic villages to the towers of New York, descends from them. Think of what that means. All of human history, every language, every kingdom, every story and song and discovery, every war and every peace, all of it traces back to a handful of survivors. But for those living through it, there was no grand vision of the future, no awareness that they carried the fate of a species. There was only survival. The earth was unforgiving. Africa, where our species first arose, was being reshaped by cycles of climate change. Droughts stripped the land of vegetation. Lakes shrank and sometimes vanished entirely. Rivers ran dry. The great herds that once roamed the grasslands moved on or died out, leaving humans with little to hunt. Predators prowled the land, lions, leopards, hyenas, competing for every scrap of food. Disease must have swept through small, malnourished groups, claiming lives when bodies were already weakened. For early humans, life was precarious. Each day meant the difference between finding food and starvation, between finding water and death. Children grew thin, families dwindled, entire groups disappeared without a trace. And yet, despite this immense hardship, some held on. Their survival was not guaranteed. It was a daily battle, fought not with the weapons of empires or the machines of industry, but with simple tools, fire, cooperation, and determination. We know so little about their individual lives. No names remain, no voices recorded, no monuments built. But we know their legacy because we are living proof of it. The bottleneck could have ended us, but it did not. From that fragile thread, humanity continued. And the evidence for this astonishing chapter in our story is not found only in ancient bones or stones, but in the most intimate record of all, the DNA carried within each of us. It is in this genetic archive that the traces of our near extinction were discovered, and where the remarkable truth of our survival first came to light. Scientists likened it to a stage filled with actors. Imagine thousands of performers, each representing a different genetic lineage. Then, suddenly, disaster strikes. Almost all the actors vanish. The stage is left with only a few figures. Every performance that follows must now be played by these few and their descendants. That is what happened to us. This event, this collapse of numbers, is what scientists call a genetic bottleneck. But when did it occur? And how many survived? The answers came slowly, as tools improved. In the 1980s and 1990s, geneticists began examining mitochondrial DNA, a special kind of DNA passed down through the maternal line. Mitochondrial DNA mutates at a relatively steady rate, allowing scientists to track ancestry like rings in a tree. Studies revealed that the variety of mitochondrial DNA in modern humans was astonishingly narrow, pointing to a small ancestral population. At the same time, studies of the Y chromosome, passed through the paternal line, told the same story. Entire stretches of human genetic history seemed to converge on a single, fragile point. By the early 2000s, whole genome sequencing confirmed it. Between about 120,000 and 70,000 years ago, humanity's numbers collapsed. Estimates vary, but some suggest that as few as 1,200 breeding individuals remained worldwide. Others propose an even smaller figure. It is difficult to grasp what that means. An entire species, reduced to the population of a single small village. Scientists also uncovered signs of something even more dangerous, the possibility of an extinction vortex. When populations shrink too low, survival itself becomes harder. With fewer individuals, inbreeding rises, increasing the risk of harmful mutations. Diseases spread more easily among small, close-knit groups. Losses cannot easily be replaced. Each setback pushes the species closer to collapse, in a downward spiral that can end only in disappearance. That spiral did not claim us, but it could have. At first, these findings were met with skepticism. Could it really be true that billions of modern humans trace their ancestry to such a tiny group? Researchers tested again and again. They used new models, ran new simulations, collected new samples from across the globe. Each time the same conclusion emerged. We had indeed been reduced to the barest minimum. The idea is haunting, but also unifying. The billions of humans alive today, the artists, the farmers, the scientists, the storytellers, the countless faces in every crowd, all descend from those few who survived. Every song sung, every word spoken, every city built, every voyage undertaken, all of it comes from a population that once could have been wiped away in an instant. Our survival was not inevitable. It was fragile, improbable, and extraordinary. The discovery in our DNA is not only a reminder of how close we came to vanishing, it is also a reminder of what shaped us. For to understand why our species shrank so dramatically, we must look outward at the Earth itself and the trials it set before us. The bottleneck was not born of chance alone. It was forged in a world of climate chaos, a world where survival was almost impossible. To understand why humanity came so close to extinction, we must step back and look at the world as it was more than 100,000 years ago. It was not the world we know today, abundant, bustling, full of technology and connection. It was a world in constant upheaval, shaped by forces far greater than any human could control. The Earth was locked in the rhythm of the ice ages. Massive glaciers advanced and retreated across continents. As the ice sheets grew, they trapped vast amounts of water, lowering sea levels and reshaping coastlines. When the ice retreated, seas rose again, flooding valleys and changing the land anew. Each cycle lasted tens of thousands of years, but within those spans were abrupt and violent shifts, sudden droughts, rapid floods, swift cooling, or scorching heat. Africa, the cradle of our species, felt these changes with particular force. At times, it was green and abundant, filled with rivers, lakes, and forests. But with each climatic swing, the abundance could vanish. Lush valleys dried into dust bowls. Forests shrank into scrubland. Rivers dwindled into narrow channels or disappeared completely. Imagine the despair of watching a great lake recede year by year, its waters shrinking to reveal cracked earth where fish once swam and herds once drank. For a community dependent on that lake, the loss was catastrophic. Food sources vanished. Water became scarce. Every day turned into a gamble for survival, and it was not only drought that threatened them. The landscapes of Africa were filled with danger. Humans were not the apex predators of their world. They lived alongside lions, leopards, and packs of hyenas, animals larger, faster, and more deadly. Even crocodiles haunted the rivers and watering holes, ready to strike. A trip for water was never safe. Every hunt carried risk. The animals humans hunted were also struggling. As the climate shifted, herds of gazelle, antelope, and wildebeest moved to new pastures or perished. Those that remained were pursued by predators stronger than humans. To compete, humans needed every ounce of skill, every tool they could make, every spark of cooperation they could muster. This was a perfect storm for extinction. Climate chaos stripped the land of stability. Food and water grew unpredictable. Predators pressed in. Small groups of humans were isolated, scattered across Africa with little contact between them. Each community was fragile, each mistake costly, each loss possibly permanent. Even disease must have played a role. With limited diets, weakened bodies, and close living quarters, illness could spread quickly. A fever in a child, an infection from a wound, a stomach sickness from tainted water. Any of these could devastate a band of just a few dozen people. The hardships were relentless, and they shaped every aspect of life. Generations were born into scarcity. Children grew up thin and weary, their parents struggling to provide. The elders, the carriers of memory and knowledge, may have been few, their wisdom cut short by hunger or disease. Life expectancy was short, and every year survived was a victory. Yet, amid this struggle, humanity endured. Small groups found ways to survive in pockets of stability. Some remained near the Great Lakes of East Africa, where water and fish could sustain them even as the land dried. Others turned to the coasts, learning to gather shellfish and seaweed, exploiting resources the land could no longer provide. What kept them alive was not strength alone. It was adaptability. Humans could eat a wider range of foods than many animals. They could change hunting strategies, shift tools, move across landscapes. They were flexible in ways that rigid specialists were not. That flexibility was our salvation. Still, the margin of survival was razor thin. Entire bands must have disappeared without leaving a trace, erased by drought or disaster. Whole valleys that once echoed with human voices fell silent. The fact that even a few endured is extraordinary. The world was not simply indifferent to their survival, it was hostile. It tested them again and again, stripping away all but the most resilient. The near extinction of humanity was not the result of one single catastrophe, but of relentless pressure. Climate, predators, disease, scarcity, and chance, all converging to press our species into a corner. This was the crucible in which humanity was forged. Our ancestors learned to endure hardship, to cooperate more deeply, to innovate with tools and fire, to adapt when the land changed. These were not luxuries. They were the only reason we survived. But survival required more than tools or tactics. It required refuges, places where conditions allowed a fragile band to hold on when all others vanished. It is to these refuges and the people who clung to life within them that we turn next. For most of Africa, the world was becoming unlivable. Droughts turned forests into wasteland. Lakes receded into salt flats. Rivers became winding scars of dry earth. For countless bands of humans, these changes meant the end. Their fires burned out, their tools lay abandoned, their voices disappeared into silence. And yet, not everywhere was so bleak. Amid the harshness, there were small oases, places where life could still cling on. These were the refuges. The most promising of these refuges lay near the Great Lakes of East Africa, Victoria, Tanganyika, and Malawi. These immense bodies of water formed by rifts in the Earth's crust were deep enough to withstand even severe droughts. When surface waters shrank, their depths preserved fish. When grasslands dried, their wetlands still supported birds, amphibians, and small mammals. Even in famine, these lakes could provide. Imagine a small band of weary families arriving at the edge of one of these lakes. They are thin, exhausted, their numbers reduced by the journey. But here they find life. They wade into the shallows with baskets to scoop up fish, gather mollusks clinging to rocks, chase waterbirds into nets. At night they roast their catch over fire, filling the air with the smell of smoke and sustenance. For the first time in weeks, perhaps months, they eat their fill. In such moments, survival was bought one meal at a time. Other refuges existed too. Along the southern coasts of Africa, the sea offered resources that land could no longer provide. Shellfish could be gathered by hand. Kelp and seaweed provided nutrition. Crabs and fish could be trapped in tidal pools. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Pinnacle Point in South Africa shows that humans were using coastal resources as far back as 160,000 years ago. These shores may have been lifelines when inland Africa dried into dust. Then there was fire, humanity's constant companion. By this time, fire was no longer something stolen from lightning. It was mastered. Carried as embers, kept alive through the seasons, tended as carefully as a child. Fire gave warmth on cold nights, protection from predators, and light in the dark. More than that, it transformed food. Roots that were toxic raw became edible once roasted. Meat lasted longer when smoked. Bones yielded marrow when cracked and burned. Fire expanded the very definition of what could be eaten. But fire also gave something less tangible, yet perhaps more powerful: community. A single flame became the center of a camp. Around it, families gathered to share food, to teach, to remember. The flicker of firelight created a space for language to grow. Children listened to elders. Hunters retold the day's chase. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next. In the glow of fire, humanity's survival was strengthened not only by warmth, but by fellowship. Archaeological finds give us glimpses of these fragile havens. Hearths preserved in caves, stone tools left by lakesides, shell middens piled along ancient shores. They are not abundant, but they are enough to tell us that some humans endured where others did not. Even so, life in these refuges was precarious. Populations remained small. A sudden disease, an unlucky hunt, or a shift in weather could reduce their numbers to almost nothing. At times, survival must have felt like balancing on a knife's edge. Each birth was precious, each death a heavy blow. And yet, against all odds, these communities endured. Perhaps it was adaptability, the willingness to try new foods, new tools, new strategies. Perhaps it was cooperation, the choice to share food with the weak, to protect the injured, to care for children not one's own. Or perhaps it was sheer will, the stubborn refusal to give up even when the world seemed intent on erasing them. From these refuges, humanity's fragile line was carried forward. The survivors may not have known it, but in clinging to life, they ensured the continuation of every story, every culture, every discovery that would follow. It is humbling to realize that every one of us is connected to those lakeside camps and coastal firesides. Their endurance is our inheritance. Their resilience is written into our blood. And hidden deep within that blood was something else, a quiet change in our very chromosomes. A genetic twist that may have shaped the path of our survival, and that every human still carries today. For thousands of years, the survivors of the bottleneck endured in their fragile refuges. They did not know they were carrying the weight of the entire species. They did not know how close humanity had come to disappearing forever. But within their very cells, hidden in the spirals of DNA, a remarkable change was waiting, a genetic twist that would shape the destiny of humankind. To understand this, we must look at chromosomes. These long strands of DNA are the scaffolding of life. They hold the instructions for building and sustaining every living body. Our closest relatives, chimpanzees, gorillas, orangutans, all carry 48 chromosomes. Humans, however, have only 46. Why? Because at some point in our deep past, 2 chromosomes fused into one. The result is what we now call chromosome 2. This was no ordinary event. Chromosomes do not simply fuse at random. Most such changes would cause errors so severe that they would be incompatible with life. But this fusion was different. It was stable. It worked. And it was passed on, generation after generation, until it became universal. Every human alive today carries chromosome 2, a signature of that ancient union. Scientists studying our DNA can see the scar where the fusion occurred. Chromosome 2 carries the remnants of 2 ancient chromosomes joined head to head. It bears the marks of 2 centromeres, though only one is now active. It even contains sequences usually found only at the ends of chromosomes, telomeres, but here, strangely, they appear in the middle. The evidence is unmistakable. Two once separate chromosomes became one. But what difference did this make? Why does it matter? Some researchers believe this fusion may have had profound consequences for human evolution. It may have changed the way certain genes were regulated, opening new possibilities for brain growth, development, and complexity. It may have influenced fertility, creating reproductive advantages for those who carried it. It may even have helped stabilize the genome during times of immense stress, allowing our species to endure when others faltered. Whatever its precise role, the fact remains. This fusion became universal among humans. It spread through the population and became part of the legacy that every survivor carried out of the bottleneck. It was not simply a genetic accident. It was a foundation stone of what would make us who we are, and the consequences were extraordinary. With larger, more complex brains came the expansion of language, memory, and imagination. The ability to communicate grew more sophisticated. A warning cry could become a sentence. A gesture could become a story. Around the firelight, parents could teach children not just what to do, but why. Lessons could be carried across generations, knowledge accumulating like treasure. Imagination itself became a tool of survival. To imagine meant to anticipate, to see a hunt in the mind before it happened, to prepare for dangers not yet present. To imagine meant to innovate, to look at a rock and see not only a stone, but a blade, a scraper, a weapon. To imagine meant to dream, to see beyond the present struggle, to hope for a tomorrow better than today. These capacities did not appear all at once. They unfolded slowly over millennia. But the seeds were there, carried within the fragile survivors of the bottleneck. Seeds that would one day blossom into art, culture, science, and civilization. We cannot say that chromosome 2 alone gave us these gifts. Evolution is never the story of a single change, but of many, unfolding together over time. But chromosome 2 is a symbol of the turning point, a reminder that deep within our very being, our history is written in the language of survival and adaptation. The survivors of Africa's refuges could not have known it, but they carried within them the blueprint for the future of humanity. Each child born, each fire tended, each meal shared was another link in a chain that stretched into the unknown. And yet, even with this genetic twist, humanity's future remained uncertain. The survivors were still few. Their lives were still harsh. For over 100,000 years, our species lingered in low numbers, clinging to existence in the shadow of disappearance. This was the long night of humankind, an age of hardship, scarcity, and near silence, when we almost vanished from history altogether. The survivors of the bottleneck carried on. They had endured drought, famine, predators, and the relentless pressure of a changing world. They carried within them the genetic twist of chromosome 2, the seeds of imagination and language, the resilience of fire and fellowship. And yet, even with all this, humanity did not surge forward into strength and abundance. Instead, for over 100,000 years, we remained fragile. Archaeologists call this period a mystery. Fossils are few. Tools are sparse. Evidence of our existence is faint and scattered. It is as if humanity was whispering through time present but almost silent, leaving behind only fragments of its story. This is why we call it the long night. In this age, our species numbered perhaps only in the thousands, never more than a fragile thread across the continent of Africa. Entire generations were born, lived, and died without ever knowing whether their descendants would continue. The possibility of extinction hung over them always, unseen but ever present, like a shadow at the edge of firelight. What was life like in this long night? Picture a small band of families camped near a river that has not yet dried. Their huts are simple branches bent into domes, covered with leaves and grasses. A fire smolders in the center, tended carefully, never allowed to go out. Children play nearby, their laughter rising briefly before being hushed by their parents, for danger lurks just beyond the trees. Lions and leopards prowl the night. Crocodiles slip through the water. Hyenas circle, waiting for scraps. Food is scarce. The men and women rise early, setting out with stone-tipped spears and sharpened blades. They track antelope across the dusty plain, scanning for signs of weakness, listening for the rustle of hooves. Often the hunt fails. When it succeeds, there is celebration, the meat shared among all, the bones cracked for marrow, the skins scraped for clothing. Nothing is wasted, but some days bring only disappointment. The group returns empty-handed and the camp eats roots, insects, or whatever fish can be caught in the river. Hunger is a constant companion. Children cry at night. Parents wonder if they will see another season. Illness is another threat. A cut can fester, a fever can sweep through the camp, a sickness can take several at once. With numbers so small, every death is heavy, every loss a wound to the whole community. And yet they endured. It was not strength alone that carried them. It was cooperation. These bands of survivors depended on one another in ways that would shape the very nature of humanity. Food was shared, not hoarded. The sick were tended, not abandoned. Children were cared for not only by their parents but by the group as a whole. In such small numbers, no life could be wasted. Every person mattered. Knowledge, too, was precious. Each skill, how to strike stone into a sharp edge, how to track an animal, how to find water in dry land, was taught carefully to the young. Elders, though few, were keepers of memory. Around the fire, they told stories of where to go, what to avoid, how to endure. These lessons were survival itself. During the long night, humanity was not alone. Other human species walked the earth. In Europe and Western Asia, the Neanderthals thrived, robust, skilled hunters, adapted to cold. In the East, Denisovans lived in caves and mountains, their presence only faintly glimpsed through fragments of bone and the traces of their DNA. In distant islands, small-bodied humans like Homo floresiensis endured, mysterious and unique. Compared to them, Homo sapiens seemed weak, fewer in number, confined to Africa, unremarkable in tools or strength. There must have been times when it was uncertain whether we would survive at all, or whether our cousins would inherit the future. Yet while our numbers remained low, something was stirring. Slowly, tools grew more sophisticated. Language deepened. The bonds of community grew stronger. The imagination sparked by our expanding brains began to shape the way we lived. We may have been small, but we were becoming adaptable in ways no other human species was. Still, the long night stretched on. Tens of thousands of years passed with little change. Entire eras came and went while humanity remained in the shadows, barely leaving a mark on the earth. The fossil record for this time is thin not because we were absent, but because we were so few, so scattered, so fragile. It is humbling to realize how close we came to vanishing forever. Had a few more droughts struck, had disease spread more widely, had predators pressed harder, our story might have ended in silence. The earth would have turned without us, but it did not. Humanity endured the long night, and in doing so, we were forged by it. The hardship sharpened our adaptability. The scarcity strengthened our cooperation. The fragility deepened our resilience. And so, when the world shifted once more, When climates warmed and food became more abundant, humanity was ready. The long night ended not with a sudden explosion, but with the slow dawn of recovery. Our numbers grew, our range expanded, our tools flourished. From the scattered firesides of Africa, a new chapter began, the great expansion of humankind. For more than 100,000 years, humanity lingered in the shadows, fragile, scarce, always a step away from vanishing. The long night tested us relentlessly, stripping away all but the most adaptable, the most resilient, the most cooperative. And then slowly the world began to change. The great ice sheets shifted. Rain returned to parched lands. Rivers flowed again, filling valleys that had lain dry for centuries. Forests expanded. Grasslands spread. With them came animals. Antelope, gazelle, buffalo, elephants, birds in vast flocks. After ages of famine, the world offered food once more. For humanity, this was the turning point. At first, the recovery was slow, almost invisible, measured not in years but in generations. A few more children survived each season. Bands that once struggled to maintain 20 or 30 members grew to 40, then 50. Families that had faced constant hunger found, at last, that there was sometimes enough to eat. But small gains accumulate. And over centuries, the fragile thread of humanity began to strengthen. This was the beginning of what scientists call the Great Expansion, the slow but unstoppable rise of Homo sapiens from near extinction to global dominance. Archaeology reveals the traces of this transformation. Stone tools became more sophisticated. Long, slender blades carefully struck from prepared cores, scrapers and awls designed for precision work, spear points strong enough for big game hunting. Bone and antler were shaped into needles and fish hooks. Shells were collected, pierced, and strung together as beads. These objects speak of more than survival. They speak of creativity, of planning, of imagination. Ochre, ground into red and yellow powders, was smeared onto bodies, tools, or stone. Some of the earliest symbolic markings appear in this period. Deliberate engravings, lines and patterns carved into ochre blocks or bone. To us they seem simple, but they hint at something profound, the birth of symbolic thought, the ability to create meaning beyond the physical. Fire, long a companion, became more than survival. Hearths were central to camps, places where food was cooked, warmth shared, and stories told. The fire became a nucleus for community. Its light lengthened the day, creating hours for talk, for teaching, for planning. Shelters grew sturdier. Simple huts of branches and hides became more refined, offering protection from wind and rain. With these, humans could venture into harsher environments, secure in their ability to build a home wherever they settled. As tools and shelters improved, as cooperation deepened, humans began to spread. At first, they moved within Africa, exploring valleys and coasts that had been abandoned in harsher times. Camps sprang up near lakes, along rivers, in caves overlooking grasslands. Over generations, these bands pushed further, filling the continent once more with human life. But the expansion did not stop at Africa's borders. As populations grew, groups ventured outward, following coastlines and rivers into new lands. The Arabian Peninsula, long a desert barrier, became passable in wetter periods. Humans crossed into the Middle East, encountering new landscapes, new challenges, and new species of humans. For humanity was not alone. In Europe and Western Asia, the Neanderthals thrived. Stocky, strong, masters of the cold, they hunted great beasts and crafted their own tools. In Eastern Asia, Denisovans lived in caves and high mountains, leaving behind only fragments of bone and the DNA that survives in us today. On islands in Southeast Asia, the small-bodied Homo floresiensis, the hobbits, still endured. The world was once a tapestry of humankinds. Homo sapiens was only one thread among many. For tens of thousands of years, our survival was not guaranteed. And yet, gradually, Homo sapiens spread further while others waned. Why? Perhaps it was adaptability, the ability to thrive in deserts, forests, coasts, and mountains alike. Perhaps it was imagination, the capacity to create new tools, new strategies, new ways of living. Perhaps it was cooperation, the ability to share, to teach, to plan together. Or perhaps it was chance. Whatever the cause, the expansion of Homo sapiens was unstoppable. By 60,000 years ago, humans had begun to move along coastlines into Asia. By 50,000 years ago, they were in Australia, a feat requiring the crossing of open sea, proof of remarkable ingenuity. By 45,000 years ago, they had entered Europe, creating cave paintings of breathtaking beauty, hunting mammoths and bison, and living alongside Neanderthals. By 40,000 years ago, they had reached Siberia. By 20,000 years ago, they crossed into the Americas. The expansion was not just physical, it was cultural. Music emerged, flutes carved from bone, drums beaten from stretched hide. Art flourished, animals painted in ochre and charcoal on cave walls, symbols etched into stone. Burial rituals became more elaborate, suggesting that humans were grappling with ideas of life, death, and meaning. The long night of scarcity had given way to a dawn of creativity. And yet, woven through this triumph was a reminder of fragility. Our genetic diversity remained low, a scar of the bottleneck. Every human alive still carried the same small inheritance from those who survived. We had spread, multiplied, flourished, but we were still, in essence, a single family. The great expansion was the flowering of humanity. From a handful of survivors in Africa, we became the most widespread species on Earth. We were explorers, inventors, artists, and dreamers. We were no longer whispering in the dark. Our voices were spreading across the world. But the story was not finished. For even as we triumphed, the legacy of our near extinction would continue to shape us. In our strengths, our vulnerabilities, and the unity written in our very blood. The great expansion carried humanity across the globe. From the shores of Africa, we spread into deserts, forests, tundra, and mountains. We crossed seas, carved tools, painted caves, sang songs, and buried our dead with care. From fragile survivors, we became a species that reshaped the earth itself. And yet, even in this triumph, the mark of our near extinction remained. Every human alive today descends from those who endured the bottleneck. Our DNA still carries the signature of that narrow passage. Compared to chimpanzees, gorillas, or even some endangered animals, our genetic diversity is strikingly low. 2 chimpanzees, chosen at random from different forests in Africa, can be more genetically different from one another than any 2 humans on Earth. A hunter from the Arctic, a farmer from the Andes, a child in Tokyo, a grandmother in Nairobi, all are remarkably alike at the genetic level. This lack of diversity brings vulnerability. Diseases can spread quickly through our populations. Genetic disorders may appear more easily, with fewer variations to buffer against them. In some ways, the bottleneck left us exposed. And yet this same shared inheritance is also a source of unity. Beneath the surface of skin, hair, and eye color, beneath the variety of cultures and languages, we are profoundly similar. The divisions we perceive today, nation, race, tribe, are shallow compared to the deep genetic kinship that binds us. We are, in a very real sense, one extended family. The bottleneck shaped more than our genes. It shaped our character. Survival in such fragile numbers required cooperation. Those who shared food, who cared for the weak, who nurtured children and protected one another, they endured. Those who could not cooperate, who hoarded or abandoned, may not have survived. Over generations, compassion, empathy, and collaboration were not just virtues. They were survival strategies. Adaptability, too, became our inheritance. Our ancestors learned to try new foods, to make new tools, to move into new lands. Those who clung only to the old ways risked perishing when the environment shifted. Those who experimented, who imagined, who innovated, they carried the species forward. Even our sense of imagination, of dreaming beyond the present, may have roots in those fragile times. To survive drought, one had to remember where water once flowed. To hunt successfully, one had to anticipate how animals would move. To endure hardship, one had to hope for better days. Imagination was not a luxury. It was a necessity. The legacy of the bottleneck is written not only in our DNA, but in the very essence of who we are. We are resilient, adaptable, cooperative, imaginative. We are a species forged in hardship, tempered by scarcity, and lifted by the strength of community. Other species faced bottlenecks too. Cheetahs, for example, carry the scars of near extinction. Their genetic diversity so low that one cheetah's skin can be grafted onto another without rejection. But unlike the cheetah, humanity did not simply survive. We thrived. From the fragile few, we grew to billions. From scattered camps, we built civilizations. From the long night of scarcity, we entered an age of abundance. And yet, it is worth remembering how fragile our story truly is. Had the droughts lasted longer, had disease struck harder, had one small group not endured by a lake or a coastline, we would not be here. The earth would have gone on without us. No pyramids, no cathedrals, no music, no science, no cities, only silence. Instead, here we are. Our survival was improbable, but it was real. Every heartbeat today echoes those who endured. Every child carries the legacy of their struggle. Every dream, every idea, every act of kindness is made possible because, long ago, a small group of people refused to vanish. This is the legacy in our blood. Fragility and resilience, hardship and triumph, unity and endurance. From them came us. From their fire our world was lit. Today, over 8 billion humans walk the earth. We live in cities that glow with light. We cross oceans in hours. We send machines to other planets. We are so numerous, so powerful, that it is difficult to imagine our absence. And yet once we almost disappeared. Once the entire human story was carried by perhaps only 1,000 souls. A single small village of survivors held the fate of all who would come after. They did not know what they carried. They did not know that from their struggle would come art, music, science, and the modern world. They only knew how to endure, how to survive one more day, one more season, one more generation. We are their descendants. Their endurance lives in us. Their fire burns in our imagination. Their resilience beats in our blood. The fragile thread of survival held fast, and from it the vast tapestry of humanity was woven. We are the children of survivors, and their story is ours.